Most people would see their 4-year-olds playing nicely by themselves and think, awesome. Me? I see my 4-year-old playing nicely by himself, and I know he's pooped his pants. During the first 2 months of quarantine, toilet paper was scarce. Cleaning supplies were scarce. It was a fine line that I was walking with the 2 big kids. Sure, you need to wipe well, but just use 3 squares at a time. You're not trying to win any awards here. Our youngest, Asher, was making a meal out of potty training, just as the other 2 had. He was doing well enough for a bit, and then quarantine hit, and our progress went right down the toilet, or not in the toilet, I should say. Before quarantine, Asher was in preschool. There was a herd mentality for potty breaks. Then, all of a sudden, school was closed and he was home, maybe not feeling like a big kid. His routine was broken, and that's when the regression started. I would be making lunch for the kids and realized that it had been a while since Asher had come in to show me a Lego he was building or make a coffee from his pretend coffee maker. I would get a little panicky as I walked to the playroom, and he would look up at me with those big brown eyes and say, "Mommy, I need space." I ask you, what 4-year-old wants space? The closer I'd get, the stronger the scent. Yep, he pooped his pants. In the beginning, I would walk him to the bathroom and clean him up, and we would talk about how he was going to try harder to listen to his body next time. I truly thought this issue would just solve itself over the course of the next couple weeks, but it didn't. It got worse, so much worse. We're living in a different house for the year while we renovate our house. So we have no neighbors. Our quarantine experience was me with the children all day, every day, and no one else. Ari would lock himself in his office to work, and I was on from morning until night, trying to make selections for our new house, creating and implementing curriculum for homeschooling 3 kids, coaching the kids to talk through their fights, screaming, "Not around the neck," more times than I wish to share, making my online grocery orders, making meals, cleaning up from meals, helping the kids write articles for our family newspaper, which was called the Cuckoo Banana Pants Tribune, getting everyone outside for exercise, cleaning the house, the list goes on. You all know what I'm talking about. Every day was a marathon, but there was never enough time to actually get everything done. Then, as an added snack, at least once a day, I was cleaning up accidents from my son who had clearly stated that he didn't have to go. One day, I saw a rock on the playroom floor. Why is there a rock on the floor? It wasn't a rock. It was poop. Another day, I saw a chocolate smear on our white chair. When did we have chocolate, I thought. It wasn't chocolate. It was poop. Asher, why did you change your clothes? Oh, I know why. Poop. I would beg him to use the toilet, and he would cry and say he didn't have to go. Then, while I was working with the other kids, he would go to the playroom and have an accident. And then he would cry when I would try to make him assist me with the cleanup. This was our normal, and it wasn't normal. After one too many, "Mommy, I think I have poop on my fingers," I started losing my patience. I started raising my voice, saying things like, "Why are you doing this? And this is really bad." I decided that we needed to go back to pull-ups. And then it happened. I was playing a math game with our oldest when I looked around and realized that I hadn't seen Asher in a while. I walked upstairs, and the smell hit me. I walked towards his bathroom slowly. I pushed open the door, and I saw it. Streaks of brown on the walls, on the sink, on the towels, on his bathrobe, on the faucet handles. There was a brown and white bar of soap all lathered up. The toilet stopped up with the contents of an entire roll of our precious toilet paper. And Asher's pull-up, poop side down, mashed into the penny tile. I walked out, tears stinging my eyes, both from the smell and the sight. I started screaming. Asher, where are you? What is wrong with you? Why did you do this? He looked so scared as he came into the room. I was shaking with anger and disgust. I shouted at my 4-year-old as I was on my hands and knees cleaning poop from the grout. I was thinking he made this mess to somehow punish me. He looked up at me so sad, but I couldn't be there for him right then. I was frustrated and tired of having to hold it together. I was fuming. Instead of running away from me, he walked slowly towards me and said, Mommy, please don't yell at me. Please don't yell. He sat at my feet and looked up at me, searching for his protector, for his mom. He looked at me and he asked, Mommy, do you still love me? That about broke me. I had lost myself, lost what was important. I needed to be there for him. I got up, washed my hands, and held out my arms for my scared son. Of course I still love you. As I held him, I looked at the soiled bathroom in a new way. I started piecing together what had happened. Asher had had an accident and was ashamed, so he had tried to clean it up himself. He had tried to wipe himself. He tried to wash his hands, but he is 4, and he couldn't do it on his own, and he shouldn't have had to. I hugged my scared son, and I told him we would figure this out together. I wish I could say it ended there. It didn't. We had a second smeared poo situation. Just like the first, a bathroom just Jackson Pollocked with crap. I walked in, I walked out. I did not yell. I did not cry. I looked for my scared son. He was hiding behind a door. Mommy, don't yell, he said. I'm not yelling. Mommy, don't be mad, he said. I'm not mad. I kept my voice calm. As I washed him in the shower, he turned to me with those big brown eyes and said, I'm sorry you have to do this, Mommy. I couldn't believe the empathy this little man was learning in this moment. I couldn't believe the patience I was learning at the same time. The next day, I put out an SOS to our pediatrician who recommended that we make a rule that Asher has to sit on the toilet after every meal. And so we did. It was around this time that I added a new job to my mom resume. Poop doula. Do you know what the anus looks like when there's a stool looming? 'Cause I do. I am now well versed in the subtle nuances of the tuchus. I get down on the bathroom floor and stare at Asher's sphincter. I wait to see it pucker into an upside-down volcano, and then for the turd to crown, while spouting lovely affirmations like, you can do it! I see it coming! Push! Asher would say, there's no more, or my favorite, it's too slobby. That's not a word, by the way. I would counter, actually, it's still coming out of you. And we debate the issue until that burdensome brown log finally splashes into the toilet bowl. And we high five. We did it together. It's been 5 months since the last manure massacre. We are not doing new science projects every day. There won't be a third issue of the Cuckoo Banana Pants Tribune. We are eating more prepackaged dinners. I've let the emails pile up a little. I still have a lot of decisions to make on our new house. But I have learned to slow down. I can't rush COVID. I can't rush potty training. I can't fix this crappy problem for my son. But I know that after lunch tomorrow, Asher is going to need his doula, and I'm going to be there for him. Shana Tova.
The time for mismatched tables brought together. Folding chairs come out of the attic, and they're placed so close that they just barely fit, and the elbows will be bumping all night long. Smells of sauteing onions, sounds of cracking eggs, and the sight of matzo balls floating at the top of the pot when they're ready to come out. Voices held together in the spirit of the holiday, in the spirit of family. Traditionally, my family celebrates Passover on the second night with a dozen or more of our closest friends. All of my recipes are meant for 20. This year, I had to do math. I had to divide everything by fourths, fifths, sixths. There were no extra tables, unless you count a small folding table piled with books just to the right height and the computer sitting there angled perfectly so our friends could see our table and hopefully the four of us in my family. Of course, I still somehow managed to cook enough matzo ball soup for way too many. We sat down. I looked around at our empty dining room table and felt all the extra space at our one table set for only 4. I felt a separation, a break in what was our pre-COVID traditions, and now life with the pandemic. For me, COVID was now official, and 2020 became something unfamiliar. Even though we celebrated virtually with friends and Zoomed through the Seder, the night felt different, and not in the how is this night different from all other nights kind of way. There was a loneliness, an unfamiliar quiet, too much space. We could see our dear friends on the computer, but it just wasn't the same. There was quiet during the Seder while we figured out the technology. Our voices held separate by the confines of Zoom. No shushing of the children so we could just get to the next page. No rush to the door to open the door for Elijah. No competition among the kids to find the afikoman first. And Diana lacked its normal excitement. And at this point, it really would have been enough. The loneliness set in and never really left. This was the new normal, and I had no idea how to make the virtual meaningful. Then I went to work. Work is different too. I work in EMS, so I am around people and in and out of hospitals every single day. At the beginning of the pandemic, at work, we were told things like to use our N95s and not throw them away, but to keep wearing it until it became grossly contaminated or torn. We were told that it's our job to respond to 911 calls, no matter what. So really, our jobs were no different than before the pandemic. But the truth is, work is different now. We need masks when we previously didn't, and we expect others to wear their masks too, and properly. We wear disposable gowns. Everything was running out, and everything still needs to be responded to. It's 911, right? So that means we turn on the lights and sirens, and we Zoom like how we used to think of it to a call. When we get there, we need to do a few things first before heading in to someone's house or store, wherever it is that we're going. Even if someone can't breathe, even if they're severely injured, or at the worst in cardiac arrest. So first we have to put on these big masks, they're P100s. They make us look like a praying mantis. Then we put on our eye protection, and then gloves and a gown, which is now plastic, and it will break if you pull or tug or move wrong, just splits open. Then another pair of gloves, and if we want, a head covering too. Then we can finally enter the scene. Now it's harder to hear, to be heard, to move, and to breathe. And in all of this, we have to get people to trust us. When we walk into a home, they were never expecting us. There's clutter, there's trash, laundry, dirty dishes. It's all still out. A wife will look to us for comfort, and we look like the people in ET. There's a distance that's not usually there. The personal is made foreign. We lose our ability to relate to a person when they're the most vulnerable, needing compassion, assistance, understanding. The wife will lead us up the stairs, apologizing for the mess. Her husband has fallen to the floor, and he's in the bathroom, bleeding, alone. He can't get up. We approach him, and I can only imagine what he's thinking. All I want to do is what I've always done. I want to reassure him with a smile, a gentle touch, say, we're there to help you. But I can't. We shout to be heard through our masks. We try and relate, but with hidden faces, how can you? I have super expressive eyebrows, but with my eye protection, even that's taken away. I can only tell them we're there to help and get to work. It's the separation of the before versus the now, the same that I felt at Passover creeping in again. I think about the idea of first protecting oneself. Work was telling me this, mandating new protocols or new self-care practices every day, it seemed. Protect myself before I can help others, even if a person is dying. But in my mind, I think, isn't this an emergency? It's like what they tell you on an airplane when those duck masks fall down. Put it on yourself before your child. But that's not really my first reaction. I haven't been tested on it, but I also never really bought into it. In my mind, I thought, of course I'm going to put that on my child first. I think about the idea of first protecting yourself. Work was telling me this. But I've been separated again from my previous practices. So then I'm home again. Just a regular day, with my kids at home doing their virtual schoolwork, and my husband's at home too, working. Now, another thing you must know is we live a nice, cozy life in a house that's just big enough. It's big enough for the four of us and the dog. It's big enough so the kids can go to school and my husband can go to work, and there's space for me to be alone during the week. I work these 12-hour shifts and I work on long weekends, and I get days off during the week, something I cherish and something I desperately need to recharge. But now, my husband, he works in our bedroom. My youngest works in the front part of the house, and my oldest is in her bedroom. So where does that leave me? Exposed, lonely, but available. Another separation. The rhythm of the week is different, the flow of the day. I love my kids, and I love when they ask me questions. But now during my me time, my recharge time, The kids can come and interrupt me with demands, quarrels, needs, ideas, their need for in-person connection. Always there, always asking, always expecting me. I am in the house, the part of the house that's open for business. My first reaction is to do whatever they need, answer all their questions, interact with them, be with them, play their games. But I am not used to it being all day, every day, even on my days off. It's so hard for me to say no. Can you wait? Or I just need some space. My youngest, she likes to talk a lot about everything, bouncing from one subject to another, peppered with leading questions like, and do you know what? This friend of mine just got a dog. Can we go visit? Can we go to insert any place here that we used to go to? Usually for her, it's ice cream. I love her, but it's just too much. So how can I recharge? Hopefully alone, so that I can be available for my kids. How can I be present to enjoy all the fun questions and ideas, even at the 13th hour of the day at home? There's no time off. Finding ways to adapt to this new situation is hard. It's hard for all of us. I remember work and the protocols put in place, protect myself before I help others. Self-care is mandated, not a choice. But at home, I've had to figure it out. I found ways to fit in some small things. I find time to exercise in my living room, hopefully alone, even for 20 to 30 minutes. I'll text a friend for a quick 5-minute conversation. And I even floss my teeth more often because I can get that time alone in my bathroom. It takes more time. So I'm figuring out what self-care I could implement now, not 6 months ago. And in doing this, I am learning to speak up and say, I need my time. I need space. If I take this time to address my needs and take care of myself, I will be prepared to be available for my kids, my family, my friends. And sometimes, no matter how unnatural it feels, it can be about me. And those around me will still be there, loving and caring about me, supporting my self-care practices. I found connection within the separation of before and during the pandemic, meaning in the Zoom. Thank you.
That was really wonderful, Helene. Yeah, I think it was so relatable for so many of us, and I know that we all feel the separation a little bit today. It's nice if just take a minute and look around and see the folks that are with us today, and just to see some faces on the Zoom. It's comforting and it's nice. It doesn't feel quite the same though. I know I miss seeing people and hugging people and sitting next to somebody that I haven't seen or talked to for a while, catching up a little bit. There is one thing I don't miss. I don't miss when that person talks too much. That's one nice thing about being home for shul in your living room. You don't have that look from the person in front of you at shul when they turn around and stare at you for talking too much. And it wasn't you, right? It was the person next to you, and you're guilty by kibitzing by association. That's something I don't miss. I don't miss Yom Kippur when you're sitting next to somebody and they have Yom Kippur breath. I wish there was just a little bit of an exception. I guess, we didn't think of this thousands of years ago, but maybe just a a certs or like a Mentos exception that we could have just for Yom Kippur when you're sitting in the sanctuary. I don't miss that, but I really do miss everybody. And I think we all feel the separation. Jen and I moved to North Carolina about 20 years ago, and we have always been in that northern person finding our way through North Carolina, and we love it. And we've spent 20 years telling people just how this is not really the South, and this is a cool place, and there's great restaurants, and there's the DPAC, and minor league baseball is better than regular baseball, and all those kinds of things we tell people. And this summer, when COVID rolled around, it changed everything. Our kids were not in Ramah, they weren't in day camps, they weren't in soccer camps, and we had to scramble. And Jen bought a 14-foot by 7-foot by 3-foot above ground pool. One of those with the real poles and everything, not the floppy one that we just had when the kids were little that sat on the ground. I came home one day and Jen had taken the hose from upstairs in the bathroom, and I saw it snaking down the side of our house into the pool, and I had to go upstairs to investigate. My wife, again, Jen, she has a way of doing things that's a little bit unusual, and sometimes we call it Gengineering. And I needed to see the Gengineering feet. So I went into the bathroom, and the garden hose was actually attached to the shower faucet with duct tape. Now, I told everybody that there's no way we're going to use that pool, and it's a waste, and it's going to take up too much room. But that first day, I was in the pool for about 7 hours. The kids were in almost as long. And I began going to that pool after work, and I would take a Shabbat swim, and I do these fun little walks on my back and play Marco Polo and all these things in this little pool. And then she bought a trampoline to complete our COVID summer. And one day I was on the floaty looking out at the kids on the trampoline, and my wife was digging a hole in the backyard with the help of our 2 dogs. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm making a fire pit. I said, just like that? Yeah, I thought you needed stones or bricks or a Home Depot kit or something, but she was building a fire with 2 dogs and a shovel. The Gengineering force was running strong in her veins that day. And those s'mores were good. Now, after about 20 years, it took the COVID summer to really put these 2 parts together. I love the cool, hip, interesting parts of North Carolina and the Triangle. And I kind of love my inner North Carolina part now, too. And they work pretty well together, and y'all, I kind of like it. And that's my story. Let's move on to our last storyteller. This is Kevin Ginsberg. Kevin Ginsberg is my partner, my very good friend. He has 2 children, Drazen and Nathan, who are exceptional kids, an exceptional wife, Andrea. I recently wished his mother a happy birthday and on Facebook, and she responded, "I have your work husband with me today." I'm not sure if it was a taunt or a playful jest, but give it up for Kevin. I will say one more thing before I introduce Kevin. Kevin got me into storytelling, and he was really fun to coach for the master, for the pupil to be able to teach the master and the master to listen was really great. Let's give it up for Kevin Ginsberg, our last storyteller of today.
I lifted up and held and read the small framed keepsake on Nathan's dresser as soon as we got home last night from Erev Rosh Hashanah meal. It was a rare in-person time with our good friends and my partner, your MC, Mike, and the Kornbluths. It was a meal that was interrupted by someone's errant look at a phone and the news of her death. I broke down. I wish I cried more. I'm thankful I cried some. I love and have loved many Ginsbergs all my life. When I was a brand new Ginsberg, about 8 days old, an older friend of my father gave a bris gift to me. It was a $2 bill, scotch taped to a piece of paper in a cheap wooden frame. The paper had my full name written on it and an original quote in this man's handwriting that read, "Your success will depend upon what you are willing to give up." The $2 picture frame stood on my dresser throughout my entire childhood. Once I knew how to read, it caught my eye and I read, or at least thought the quote just about every day, morning and night, thousands and thousands of times. As is often the case with mantras or koans or nuggets of wisdom, this curious quote evolved in meaning over time. It was about austerity. Your success will depend upon what you are willing to give up. Meant as a school child, I sometimes gave up television time to study, following in my father's footsteps of hard work. It meant sacrifice. Sometimes the quote felt more psychological, about attitudes or ways of being to give up. My success depends upon my willingness to give up being judgmental or self-righteous or timid or lazy. Sometimes the quote took on a spiritual lens, letting go of attachments, the giving up of material desires, or philanthropic, giving up money to give to others. On some of my less abundant days, or feeling days as a young adult, I recall it giving me solace that if all went to hell and I was ever completely broke, I could at least break open the frame and have $2 to spend. I loved that framed $2 bill. It was one of my most meaningful possessions. Each word is rich with possibility and possible interpretations. What does success mean anyway, or depend upon, or willing? What does it mean to give up? Isn't it interesting that this wise friend of my father's used the future tense about where you will get to, your success will depend, but also the present tense, are willing, about what you have to be willing to do now to get there then. It was as if I were granted my own portion of Talmudic wisdom to grapple with from the day of my bris forward. And then, one day, I blinked and I turned around and I had a wife and a couple of sons of my own. Sons who had bris ceremonies and maybe not so willingly gave up their foreskin to successfully enter the covenant. And so when my firstborn son, Drazen, was about 8 days old, I opened the frame and altered the document for the first time in 32 years, adding Drazen's full name to the inscription. I closed it back up and I willingly gave up my most meaningful possession, gifting the framed $2 bill to my baby boy. And I placed it on his bedroom dresser, hoping it would make some similar deep impacts on him once he learned to read, and his eyes passed by it every morning and night. I don't think he ever read it. And at some point between Drazen's bris and now, the framed $2 bill went missing. I didn't notice exactly when that happened, and admittedly, I didn't think much about the framed $2 bill or the quote for some number of years. And so many years flew by. Both my sons have now been bar mitzvahed. 3 years ago was Drazen's bar mitzvah, my first son's bar mitzvah, a peak experience for a proud Jewish man, watching my son become a man himself, and he killed it. For many months, he willingly gave up his free time in order to succeed. He practiced and studied independently for hundreds of hours, perfecting every syllable and trope. Not one time did I ever even think about having to bug him to practice. And he executed the services like a champ, and we had a beautiful party for over 200 friends and family members who flew in from all over the country. It was everything I could have dreamed of as the father of the bar mitzvah boy. My younger son, Nathan's bar mitzvah was more of a challenge. One reason it was more of a challenge was because Nathan is more of a challenge. He studies differently than Drazen. That is to say, Drazen actually studies, whereas Nathan just kind of figures things out on his own schedule when he darn well pleases, and he does it with sass. So I thought I was being smart to get ahead of his own darn well pleasing sassy schedule, and 7 months before his bar mitzvah, I started force feeding Shachrit and Haftorah practice on an unwilling Nathan every night. Along with that came force feeding pressure and stress into his young psyche. It didn't go well. It led to many fights. Me against Nathan, father versus son, man versus almost man. It was not fun. It did not lead to success. Just days before his bar mitzvah, our tension hit an all-time high with me nagging him and guilting him that he should have practiced more all those months, and I lost it. I laid into him. I gave up all self-control. It was the worst fight we ever had, and we had had dozens of painful fights in the previous 13 years. Another reason Nathan's bar mitzvah was more of a challenge than Drazen's was because his bar mitzvah was March 14th, 2020, the weekend America plunged into full-time corona consciousness. During the months of planning before the bar mitzvah, Andrea and I were worried about too many people attending, not because of the cost. Our venue didn't charge per person, but just actual capacity in the room where our Saturday night party was scheduled to be. So we were kind of happy as time went on, and we got occasional no RSVPs, but we still had too many people coming. The first week of March, we started getting more no's from out-of-towners concerned about traveling, and even though we may have thought they were being overly careful at the time, that finally gave us actual breathing room at the venue. 3 days before, on Tuesday, March 10th, about half of the out-of-towners had canceled. At this point, we knew we were going to have a little smaller than expected affair, but we were content that we could still have a nice event to celebrate our son. A Wednesday, March 11th, 2020 CNN.com headline read, quote, "Take this seriously. Coronavirus is about to change your life for a while." The Ginsbergs were fine with it changing our lives for a while, as long as the life-changing could wait until Sunday afternoon. On Wednesday night, less than 48 hours before Kabbalat Shabbat, my parents had arrived from South Carolina and we were out to dinner together when we got a call from Alan Friedman warning that the Bethel board was meeting and that we may have to limit attendance at the service because of the coronavirus. They weren't sure yet, but they may mandate a 100-person limit in the shul. It was hard for us to see past the weekend. We were living in real time as the rules were changing in real time, just hoping to fit in our boy man's big affair, knowing that we really needed to be willing to give some things up. Thursday morning, we went to Bethel for a photography session. During the session, Alan came in to tell us it was decided that we had to limit attendance to 50 people, about 8 friend families plus our immediate families. And after an 8-minute family huddle, we started the process of unwinding all the plans that had been made. We made sure all out-of-towners knew to stay home, except my parents and sister-in-law who'd already arrived. And we informed most in-town friends and colleagues that they were effectively uninvited. We made the calls to cancel the dinner plan for the following night after Kabbalat Shabbat and the venue for Saturday night and all the other details. Friday, March 13th and Saturday, March 14th are the last times I have set foot inside of Bethel Synagogue and the last in-person Bethel event with anywhere close to 50 people. Services were small, but still full of ruach and elbow bumps. Nathan made us proud. None of the pressure I'd put on him was needed or helpful. He and I were able to joke about it at that point. He has a high capacity for forgiveness, which is a really great synonym for atonement and for giving up. We had a small party at our home that Saturday night. My friends found Hava Nagila on YouTube and lifted Nathan on a chair in our dining room. Nathan still claims he hated that part, but he also acknowledges he will be thankful one day for the memory. The last few friends and their children to remain after hours played guitar and piano and sang just for fun, and it was good. In the grand scheme of life, of course, none of these changes we had to make were that big of a deal. Most people deal with much bigger and more serious challenges every day. But it wasn't easy for us or him. At one point during our house party, Nathan was outside in our hammock alone, taking a moment by himself to cope with giving up the weekend he thought he would have. It was a pivot that he had to make in the moment, in real time, while COVID-19 was becoming a thing, to become a man not just because of the ritual, but because of the moment calling for maturity. I remember when my parents leaving to drive home and hugging them, wondering when, and even if, I would ever hug them again. Even as it was happening, there was a sense among all of us at the party that it was an evening that would forever be the axis point between before and after. And then the party was over, and it was after. I went to bed that night, March 14th, 2020, with an unprecedented combination of exhaustion and scotch, pride in my son, and joy for my family, but mostly fear for the world, fear for my family, and our ability to continue to succeed. I remember laying in bed that night with the bar mitzvah finally behind me and a brave new world in front of me, trying to hold on to something to give me comfort. And I thought of my framed $2 bill. Your success will depend upon what you are willing to give up. The last 6 months have been crazy for everyone, in so many individual and collective and systemic and ruthless justice dying ways. And still, we also still have to and need to and get to live our lives, to decline despair, to fight good fights, and to find meaning and joy and connection in ritual and friendship and family, in New Year's, in community, and in us. My success may depend on what I'm willing to give up, but the corollary must also be true. My success also depends on what I am not willing to give up. Nathan and I haven't gotten into even one real fight since that last big blow up over 6 months ago, which is an extraordinary thing for our family life. The slowness of Corona's schedule has been good for us, but more than that, I gave up the need to control him, and he gave up the need to resist me, and what arose in its place has been ease and trust, because we were not willing to give up our friendship, our relationship. Since thinking about it the night of Nathan's bar mitzvah, I've spent hours looking for that framed $2 bill. It's been fun, scurrying through boxes of old memories I was never willing to give up, but I never found the framed $2 bill. Andrea spent some time looking too. She's usually our household finder. Finally, just 10 or so days ago, I asked Drazen about it. To my chagrin, he didn't even know what the framed $2 bill was. To my satisfaction, though, he said it sounded like an amazing keepsake he would love to see if we ever found it. Nathan remembered exactly what it was, and he looked for 30 seconds before finding it. Apparently, it had made its way back into my room at some point and fell behind my dresser. And I was thrilled to have it back, and so I opened it up, and 13 and a half years late, I added Nathan's full name to the inscription, and I closed the frame back up, and I placed it on the dresser in his room.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, that is our storytelling lineup. I hope you all enjoyed it. This was an hour where we got to hear about poop and self-care and $2 bills. And it is our goodbye to 5780. Do not let the door hit you on the tush. 5781, may it bring a sweet and happy new year to everybody. Shana Tova, thanks for joining. The Meta Show.
Ashikawa.